All right, how's it going? Welcome to the first Patreon tutorial. I thought I'd go for something simple for the first one, so I went for the tasty Screeches in Serum tutorial that you guys showed interest in. Yeah, so I'm going to show you kind of two ways I do my Screeches in Serum. There's the high pass method and the kind of flange filter method, and I'll go through both of them. First of all, this is kind of the sort of thing we're going to be making. That's the high pass one, and this is the flange one. That second one is quite a typical chime sound, and I'll teach you how to make that. So yeah, we got Serum, initialize patch here. I'm just gonna get my keyboard up. So I guess the first thing you need to do when you're making a screech is you need to decide, because it's quite a tonal sound, you need to decide what note you're going to be sitting on. For now, I'm just going to build this screech in F because that's quite a typical root note for dubstep. Yeah, so for this first one, we're going to do the high pass filter method. So I'm going to go for something. Really, we just need anything kind of gritty with plenty of kind of harmonic texture in and kind of nice high end going on. So we'll go for this monster one patch. Also, it's good because you can. This is loaded up with Serum, so you can. It's not a custom waveform, so you can just follow along exactly with this sound. So the monster waveform has plenty of grit to it and stuff. So we're gonna pick this. Yeah. So first of all, we're gonna get our LFO position to look something a bit like this, with a ramp up and a ramp down at the end. And typically I have it right at the top so that our position stays on that nice tonal screech at the top there, like that. So we're going to start off with a bit of movement with the wavetable position. And I'm kind of looking for a good point at the top of the LFO where it's hitting some nice harmonics. That'll do for now. So next we're going to dial in our high pass filter, and this is really going to be what's going to create the bulk of the sound. It doesn't necessarily matter what the waveform is here. This is really what's going to be creating it. So we want a really high resonance peak on here, and this is what's going to create the screechiness. And the cutoff position is going to move that peak to wherever we want it to go. You can see I've dialed in some drive and some fat just to make that peak really, really stand out. So you can hear as we move that across, we're highlighting certain harmonics from this wave table here. So we're going to try and find a nice position for this to sit. And you can really boost up the resonance all the way. Let's put it there for now. And we're going to put our sub underneath, direct out. And we're going to control it, the level there with the LFO. I'm also going to control the level here just a little bit. So, now we can really bake in the sound of the screech with our effects. Mostly it's going to be the distortion. So typically I can either use the top end of tube. You know, that's already given us a nice texture. Or diode is pretty mental as well. Yeah, in fact I'm pretty tempted to use diode for this, but I might change it later. But you can hear that that's already starting to screech quite nicely. I might even reduce the amount this level goes down here. Yeah, let's just. So you could already hear where I'm placing this cutoff is changing that resonant peak and changing which harmonic from the original sound is being boosted for the screech. And it's kind of just about finding a sweet spot that really makes it squeak. So that's kind of most of the idea of the sound, really. So from there, let's get our multiband compressor, which is basically OTT. And if you want to, so in this case, I quite like the screech at the top, but as it's ramping up and as it's ramping down, there's kind of a gritty bit of audio that I want to, not draw as much attention to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the threshold of this compressor come down with the LFO. And you notice that, it takes a bit of the edge off these sides of the LFO. And of course we're going to have our hyper dimension here. Dimension about 50% wet and size at like 4%. It's that typical dimension I use to just have a nice combination of, a centralized bass sound, but with plenty of stereo field as well. And what I've started doing a little bit more is actually going full detune on the hyper side of things, unison all the way up, and just dialing in a little bit of that with the LFO to bring some more width and just kind of, just a bit of a change in timbre. Only a bit, because if you go all the way to the top, you get that kind of weird phasing, and that's not necessarily what we're going for with the screech. We just need a little bit of that to give the stereo image just a bit more interest. So that's really starting to screech quite nicely. Tempted to just tweak that, and it's quite nice. Let's just boost the high end here. So obviously at this point, you've kind of got a decent screech setup. So you can find other sweet spots or different, I quite like making a patch in Serum that I can use for a variety of timbres around the same sound. So, you'll kind of hear in my track that I'll have a screech going like this, and then later on you'll have a screech going like, or something else. And I really like kind of building that in. And once you've got this position as well, you can mess around with the original wavetable position to see if anything works better with your settings. So that's actually quite nice there. You can hear that that's definitely a sweet spot there. And by the way, if you want to change, if you want to move this knob in smaller increments, you can hold Shift, and it changes and shows you, the hertz that's hitting. So that's pretty clean. Hopefully that wasn't peaking like mental. So that's quite a nice screech. I think we could do some more to clean it up though. So we could take a low cut filter here, low pass filter, and again that's just taking the edge off the start and end of the LFO. Can also introduce another resonance peak there. And that's really it. That's kind of very basic sort of screech sound with the high pass filter. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to show you. So, say you find a really nice spot where it's screeching and you want to move to a different note. So right there is really, really nice. But if I hit a different note, it's not going to line up on the same point. So what you can do is you can get the note thing here. What's it called? Not an LFO. It's just a modulator, I guess. And this will move the point at which the cutoff is sitting based on which note you're playing. You can see how there's this green spot and as I go up. And you can change the curve here to change how much it's affected. But yeah, so if you do that, and then you drag it across the entire thing, and you find your original cutoff here with the LFO. There we go. We've locked that onto F. So now as you change notes, that is going to the cutoff point is going to change with it to make sure that that resonance peak is hitting the correct harmonic for each note as you go up or down a scale. So that's that. I'm just going to check I'm still recording. I am. So that's the first method. The second method I think is kind of a bit more chime-ish, a bit more unique to me. And I'm referring to this kind of screech sound here. So basically, when you're creating a screech, you're really looking for any kind of filter or method that really produces a big resonance peak. Yeah, so that's what we're going to do this time, but with a flange filter instead. So we're going to get another initialized Serum patch here eventually. Please, thank you. I'm going to go an F again here. So for this one, I'm going to use quite a typical Chime wavetable, which is the retro speaking one. This is kind of how you create those sort of wait for me type screeches. So yeah, we got this retro speaking wavetable, which has really interesting kind of textures. Very kind of crispy sounding. We're actually going to put this an octave up. So you'll notice that there's sudden jumps between the different timbres as you go along. So like there's one there, for example. And if you're modulating this wavetable position, we want them to more smoothly transition between those different timbres. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into here and click Morph Crossfade. And that's just going to create a smoother transition between. And we could even do morph spectral as well to make it even smoother. So you'll notice that that's already kind of pretty screechy, so we're just going to accentuate that with a flange filter. So we're going to create the same sort of LFO shape as before and create the same kind of movement here. Let's go for that now. I might change it later, but yeah, so we've got that. We could do the same kind of shaping with the level here, the level of the sub too. Yeah, and we're going to introduce our flange filter. So let's go for high and low. And make sure this is, there we go, all the way. So, as soon as you turn up the resonance, you can tell that shit is going down. So you can introduce some drive as well in here. And you might already be hearing sort of sweet spots in that. So let's pick a sweet spot and give it a bit of movement with the LFO. Let's just go with that for now. Yeah, so for this, I'm going to go for the softer tube distortion. Serum's actually doing a really funky thing right now, where this is creating stereo width. I'm very unsure as to why it's doing that, but we're gonna go with it. So yeah, there we have a kind of bass sound. Now, something I typically I generally do is actually take the sub off direct out and allow it to pass through the filter and the distortion and see how that sounds, because it can actually add a bunch of kind of lower texture to the sound. You can achieve the same effect by just sticking a sine wave underneath it as well. But we got a nice starting point there. So let's do our usual thing. We got the distortion. We're gonna compress as well. Whoa there. There we go. Actually, don't feel like I need to do much movement on that. Yeah, and then we've got our hyper dimension. So, because of this weird thing that Serum's deciding to do, it sounds like we don't actually need that much, which is strange. But let's try out the detune and see what that feels like. Yeah, let's have a bit of that in there. Yeah, so I mean, it's already sounding pretty good. Let's do the same kind of low pass filter situation and see if that sounds all right. Yeah, not bad. So from this point, I'm just gonna mess around with the wavetable position. And the cutoff position. So you can hear in there's just a ton of sweet spots and different timbres you can pick out. You can always put a macro on here and sort of control it from there. That'll help you pick out kind of more specific sweet spots as well. You can do the same thing with the note voicing here. Not voicing, the note modulator. But that's a very typical sort of chime sound that. And again, you can mess around with the different pitches. For this particular sound, I feel like even with the sub in there, we could do some more beef on the low mid. So let's see what we can do about that. If we change the spec to direct out and come in with a new lower sound here. So I'm actually not going to put this through the filter because I think it's fine on its own. But let's see what that sounds like. And you can kind of hear there that was just too much for the distortion. We want to make sure that the screech is the main sound and that this is just adding to those lower frequencies. If we feel like we need more harmonics in there, we can dial this to, a saw triangle. Square is going to be kind of the sharpest. That seems to be really pumping how we want it. Yeah, so that's basically it. Pretty simple, just two different methods of really creating that resonance. Flange filter is perfect for that because you have these dips and troughs that means that even the smallest movements in cutoff, it means that these are lining up with different harmonics in the original sound to create kind of a different architecture for the sound overall. Quite liking it right there. And then, you know, once you've got settings like this ready to go, you can just try out a completely different wavetable. And that's just kind of trial and error from there to figure out how you want to sculpt the sound. Like something like that, I would be happy to just lay that over a growl sound or use it to texture something I already have. But yeah, hopefully that kind of wraps up. That's how I make most of my screech sounds, and maybe on top of that I'll add sort of some kind of square wave material to emphasize a certain tone, or, you know, do kind of chip arps alongside that is something I've been doing quite recently. But yeah, that's basically how I make all my screech sounds. Hopefully that's been useful, and yeah, I'll see you on the next tutorial.